Canadian prison guards are ramping up their fight against budget cuts, gang violence, and overcrowded conditions they say are putting staff and public safety at risk. Tomorrow, about 500 members of the Union of Canadian Correctional Officers will rally outside the Calgary constituency office of Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Then they'll knock on the doors to raise awareness about the impact of the Conservative tough-on-crime agenda. Is the Harper government's approach to combating crime actually fueling violence behind bars and compromising public safety? Or is the union putting on a show to protect its own interests in an era of budget cuts? MPs are standing by ready to debate, but first we're going to Edmonton. Joining me now is Pierre Millette, the president of the Union of Canadian Correctional Officers. Thanks so much for joining me today. Now, you toured 40 federal correctional facilities in 3 weeks. What did you find?
First of all, my tour began like 3 weeks ago, like you're saying. Each place I'm visiting, I'm taking the time to go talk with the frontline officer on their post, on their work post. And I'm asking all the way to them the same question. What kind of difficulty you're facing on your job? 3 big major concerns that everybody's telling me. The overcrowding. The second one, the double bunking, and the management of the population.
But are Canada's prison populations more violent because of prison conditions such as double bunking, as you just mentioned, overcrowding, or might it have to do with the type of prisoners in the system? Could it be that inmates themselves are just a more violent population?
I think it's a combination of about the 3 major concerns that people got, you know. First of all, the big one that people are telling us all the time is to manage all those kind of population that we can have inside institution. Example, there's some inmates, they cannot be with other inmates. You have to split the population. Some place, they're going to have around 8 or 9 different population in the same institution. And this one, it's a big issue, how to manage those inmates. They cannot walk together. They cannot have their activity together. It's more difficult to manage. And you're going to face sometimes difficulty. You know, the overcrowding of institution, there's a problem there because some unit, they're going to be full double bunking, and the other unit, you're going to be in the same place. We got some empty bed, but you cannot mix those inmates. At the end, it's creating a lot of frustration between the inmates.
So what are you finding is happening with the inmates?
Inmates are more difficult to manage. You're going to, example, if they're passing all the time in their cell, because that's the other big question that we're asking to the people. What kind of job, what kind of program he may receive inside? And I'm very surprised to hear about the numbers. Some place, they're talking to me about 50% of inmates have no job. At the end of the day, they're passing more time in cell, more time to doing, how can I say that? No program, no school, no works. It gives them more time to be doing nothing. Doing nothing,
and so they're just sitting there, or what's happening with them?
They're just making their time. You know, to be tough on crime, we have to be careful when we're using the word to be tough on crime. Tough on crime don't mean we're opening a door, we put somebody there for 5 years, and at the end, after 5 years, we open the door and we say to the guy, okay, your time is over, you can go back and be a neighbor to the public Canadian.
Now, we asked the Prime Minister's office for a reaction to your planned march tomorrow, and that's going to happen in Stephen Harper's riding. Here's what we got for a response. These big union bosses prefer political stunts rather than practical dialogue. Our government has reached out and asked to sit down with the union to discuss our changes and how they will benefit the current system. We will continue to deliver on the commitments made to Canadians during the last election, which includes getting tough on crime while finding practical efficiencies and paying down the deficit. And that's from a Prime Minister's spokesperson. What's your reaction to that?
My reaction is simple to that one. We never refuse to meet with them. But first of all, somebody have to call us. For the last 2 years, we succeed to meet with Mr. Vic Tate for 10 minutes. And I know there's a kind of he's accusing us that we don't try to meet with him. Just to tell you 2 things. In the summertime, we sent him a letter to create a forum on public safety. He declined the invitation. 3 weeks ago, I was in the Maritime. I sent my business card to him by members. He never called me back. When they're trying to say to us they want to sit with us, I'm still waiting an invitation.
So no one reached out?
No, I don't have an invitation.
So what's the solution? What do you want the government to do?
First of all, they have to think about all the big change they want to do. You know, we're facing a lot of challenge. Correctional officer, they don't disagree with the challenge we're going to have to face, but at the same time, we want to be sure they're going to make the good decision. Just to give you an example, they're supposed to build 2,700 new cells. In April, they announced the closure of 3 institutions. Just there, we're losing 1,000 beds. Plus, in the 2,700 beds that we got, 700 of them are for minimums. It left us with 1,000 beds. 1,000 beds with the double bunking we're facing across the country, there's no more space. And with the new law they passed, the C10, C25, how are we going to manage those inmates? How are we going to manage those populations? That's the kind of question we need some answer, because we're going to have to work there. Never forget, there's always a correctional officer opening a door inside an institution. It's easy to review all the stats, but at the end of the day, there's somebody who is going to open a door in those institutions.
Pierre Millette, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So let's bring in MPs now to react. Candace Hepner is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety. Thanks so much for joining us. In Montreal is Francis Scarpellegia, the Liberal public safety critic. Appreciate you both being here. Ms. Hepner, I want to start with you. What's the government's response to these frontline correctional officers' concerns about their safety, first off?
Well, I think what Mr. Millette I find unfortunate is he's in charge, and he's the head of a number of members of correctional officers who are trained, who are competent, who have chosen, to their credit, a very, very dangerous job to do, and they put their lives on the line every day. We have confidence in these correctional officers to do their job. We've given them the tools. We continue to provide the tools that they need. And Mr. Millette, I think, needs to recognize that his officers actually are fit for the job. They can do it. It's a dangerous situation. These are people who have broken the law. They are violent. That's why they're behind bars. And I don't think Mr. Millette would suggest that we release these dangerous, violent people into general society in order to commit violent acts against Canadians. So they're in prison. Mr. Millette and other correctional officers have chosen this very difficult job to do. We believe that they're trained, that they are up for the job, that they are committed to what they do. And so, I think it would be good if he would have confidence in the correctional officers that he's representing.
Now, what about the fact that he says he wants to sit down, speak with the government about this, but he hasn't been contacted?
My understanding is he was sent an email, but let me be very clear, and if he's watching, the minister has indicated that he would be willing to meet with Mr. Millette, and I think maybe he could call the minister's office, maybe check his email, because my understanding was that there was an email sent.
Okay, so is it a concern of theirs? Is this a part of them being concerned because there was $295 million in cuts to Correctional Services Canada in the last budget?
Well, this is a union representation. Unions never like any cuts. What we have a job to do is to be responsible with taxpayers' dollars to make sure that, for example, facilities like Kingston Penitentiary, which is old, it is dilapidated, it is not worth putting any kind of investment in. In fact, it's dangerous for the guards. We have a responsibility to close facilities like that down, and then when we need to make additions to existing facilities, do that where these facilities are in better shape, and it actually makes for sound investment. But certainly what he's doing is speaking for his union, and he freely admits that. I mean, he's on a bus tour, traveling around trying to kind of create a ruckus, as opposed to actually sitting down and meeting with the people like Minister Taves who are responsible for this.
Mr. Scarpellegia, I want to bring you in here. What are your response to these concerns from these correctional officers?
Well, first of all, I lament the rhetoric coming from the Prime Minister's office to, qualify Mr. Millette as a big union boss in an effort to discount what he has to say is unfortunate. I think the government should be listening very closely to what the frontline correctional officers are saying. I think the minister should pick up the phone himself and call Mr. Millette and instead of asking Mr. Millette to chase after him. This is a very dangerous job. I agree with Candace, and these correctional officers do extremely good work. But they're the ones who know the system much better than anyone else. I mean, they know the system. They're on the ground. And if they think that things have a chance of getting out of control because of overcrowding or because of cuts to the agency's budget, then I think they should be listened to. and they should be taken seriously. I don't think it should take the threat of protesting in front of the Prime Minister's office to get the government to pay attention.
I want to show you some stats that Power and Politics got through Access to Information. This was back in July, that revealed a significant increase in incidents requiring corrections officers to use force in prison. So let's take a look. The total number of use of force incidents, and that's things like using pepper spray, restraining, also tear gas, up 37% from 2007 to 2012. Across the prairies, the number increased by 112%. And in Quebec, where the government has announced the closure of Leclerc facility, they're up 58%. So, Ms. Hepner, when you look at these statistics, don't the guards have a legitimate concern?
Anytime an increase in violence happens in penitentiaries, obviously it's a concern for everyone. We need to make sure that there are measures so that people in prison obviously are held accountable for the violent actions that they commit. But I don't know what the suggestion would be, whether it would be from the Liberals, from Mr. Millett, from any of the opposition, that we now release these violent people into...
I don't think that's... Is that what they're saying, though, really?
Well, really, what we're doing is we're closing down a facility that is old, that is antiquated, that is dangerous. We are expanding existing facilities, which is prudent, which means that we're going to have the facilities needed. We don't have the burgeoning population that has been reported. There has been a slight increase, but what we've stopped is the revolving door. We've stopped violent people who were in prison, got out of prison, went back to prison, got out. So I'll just quickly finish this point. So what we've done is stop that. I'm not sure what Mr. Millett is suggesting. In terms of double bunking, it's as low as 17% in some, even lower in some facilities across the country. It's a common practice. He would acknowledge that when they are making these operational decisions, they are not placing inmates together who hate each other, who are in opposition, who are fighting. They make strategic decisions, even in regards to double bunking. So the suggestion that these people are supposed to be out on the street, I would disagree.
I don't think that's what Mr. Millett was suggesting. What he was saying in his interview is that they're becoming more violent, that they're joining gangs, and it's a concern for the safety of the security guards.
Right. Again.
So what should the government be doing to ensure the safety of the people who have to look after these inmates?
We listen. We believe that we're giving them the tools. In fact, my colleague Ryan Leaf, I understood he just put a notice on the order paper. He's going to be introducing a bill that correctional officers have been asking for that has to do with blood sampling for inmates. This is something they've asked us for, and my understanding is that's what this bill addresses. We continue to do this, but the suggestion that you're right, we're getting more gangsters off the street and into prisons. And I know Francis was part of the study that we did recently, drugs and alcohol in prisons, and how do we help, first of all, treat addictions, but make sure that they don't get in because they facilitate gang activity. These are things that we do. These are the things that we're committed to doing. But what we're not going to do is somehow say, well, these people, these dangerous people, these gangsters, shouldn't be in federal penitentiaries being guarded by correctional officers, and instead they should be on the street. That's what we're not going to do.
I still don't think that's what anybody's saying, is to put these people back on the street.
Basically, he's saying the option is make sure they're not violent. They're violent people. That's why they're in prison. And he's complaining about our legislation, and I think the opposition has been very clear in their complaints and their disagreement with our legislation.
Well, let's go ahead, Mr. Scarpellegio.
I think it's a bit of a stretch to assume that either police officers or correctional officers are soft on crime. I mean, I think that's a stretch. I don't think many people would believe that. If they have concerns, they must be real. I mean, they're not, they believe in upholding structure and authority, and I don't think that, they believe in being soft on crime in any way. But I think what we have in the prisons, and I'm sure Candice will agree, is that the situation is much more complex. And Mr. Millett said it himself. There are 8 or 9 populations that the officers, the correctional officers, have to manage. I'm not sure that was the case a number of years ago. Technology has made it more complex. I mean, just take the call forward option. I mean, we know that, as we heard, and Candice will attest to this, we heard in our study on drugs in prison that an inmate can make a phone call to his spouse or her spouse, and that person can forward the call to a network of gang members. So it's a much more complex situation. And if you're going to be taking $300 million out of the system by 215 with the possibility of a growing population, then something's going to have to give, and it might be the rehabilitation programs. And I think these are the kinds of concerns that Mr. Millett and his union have. I don't think they're soft on crime.
Just, you have 10 seconds.
I would just say, I think we want to be really clear. We support our correctional officers. We respect, as Canadians do, as I know Francis does, we respect the work that they do. We want to reach out to them. We want to talk. Protests might serve a purpose for them in some way. But at the end of the day, we all have the same goals in mind. We want to work together with our correctional officers. We want to make sure they have the tools that they need. We also want to keep Canadians safe.
Great. Candace Hepner, thank you so much for joining us. And Francis Scarpellegia, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.